Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, we're going to talk about just going over the top in terms of entertainment and stuff like that. In other news, I've got some stuff moved in, some furniture and things like that. I'm getting everything finalized, moving in with Claudia. I was thinking about maybe doing a video on Maya. Claudia really wants me to do a video on Maya because Maya is her baby. And she's been in all the videos, just that she's down on the ground doing whatever. Got her all excited now that I'm talking about her. And I was also going to do a video on Claudia, but I keep intending for her to be here so she can sit off camera and snark at me while I talk about her. But she comes back in the afternoons, and that's when we run our errands and everything like that, so I keep neglecting to actually sit down and do that with her. But we'll get to it. But anyway, though, the point is today I thought I would talk about just going over the top and entertainment and stuff like that. We've been talking about My Little Pony and whatnot, and I'm kind of saying farewell to the show. Not entirely. I watched the Apple Parents episode that recently came out, and that was a good one. But like I said, when I say I'm not gonna really watch the show anymore, I don't mean like I'm just gonna be like, I can't watch the show on principle. Like I despise it now. It's all over. I can still watch episodes if people think that they're like really amazing. They're like, oh, you gotta watch it. But I'm not. I've let go of the idea that I'm gonna be emotionally invested in the show. All it would really take to ruin a precious moment in that show is to have a marketing analyst come in and say like, oh, this is really good on the demos, and they would just change something. So like, the Apple Parents, like everyone's like, oh, it's so sad because they're dead. But, if Hasbro decides that the parents sold really well and they want them to be a staple part of the show, then they could just come in and make a change. And, the Apple Parents would be alive. Like, that's how My Little Pony works. And it's unfortunate, but a big part of what I've really done is not, like, moved on to hate the show. It's just that I've kind of let go of the idea that it's going to be consistent or live up to those expectations. So yes. So the thing, though, one of the things that I talked about back a while ago about like being at the fourth wall and justifying stuff like that and trying to sort of reconcile how a show works internally is that it doesn't matter if a show is willing to go just totally over the top and have a lot of fun. If it's breaking the fourth wall, if it's doing all kinds of crazy things, then you give it a pass on a lot of logical inconsistencies. And in fact, I really like a lot of different kinds of entertainment that do this sort of thing. And one thing that really springs to mind is there's a lot of work done by, I think it's Salvador del Torre? I think I should have looked this up so I got his name right for sure. But it's the guy who did The Book of Life and El Tigre and I believe Mucha Lucha. I'm not entirely positive on Mucha Lucha, but you can tell like The Book of Life and El Tigre look very similar, so that one's like dead obvious. But I think that he was involved in Mucha Lucha as well. And I really like the stuff that this guy does because probably for the same reason that I like El Santo. I also really like El Santo movies. And I've talked about El Santo in the past. El Santo was like this Mexican wrestler from the 50s. And, he just ran around and he like wrestled vampire women and like aliens and all kinds of other crazy things. It was just really like crazy and over the top. Anyway, though, so Salvador del Torre, he kind of does a lot of entertainment about sort of like Mexican culture and Mexican values and things like that. And the shows that he does, they have rules, and there's consistency and character development and things like that. But there's always a lot of kind of tongue-in-cheek behavior throughout the entire thing. Like he takes sort of the really fun, like the Mexican stuff, like the mariachi and Mexican wrestling and like all kinds of things, like all those sort of like fun sort of Mexican camp culture kind of things, and he just has fun with them. Like in The Book of Life, there's like this group of mariachi guys, and they're just friends with the main character. I can't remember what his name is now. Manuelo? Maybe Manuelo. I don't know. It's been a little while since I've seen The Book of Life. But there's a bunch of mariachi guys, and they're just like hanging around with him, and the guy like wants to play guitar, and his dad's like, no, be a bullfighter, son. And he's like, no, I don't want to stab bulls to death. It seems kind of cruel. And the dad's like, no, it's great. People love it. It's awesome. And, so he's just hanging out with, like, these mariachi guys, and they're just sort of, like, gutter trash running around. But they're chicanerous, and they're fun, and they play these cover songs and, try to help Manuelo win the girl throughout the entire thing. And so it's a lot of fun. And his other shows, El Tigre, same way, like, they have this sort of thing going on where they've got, like, this villain code, and everyone's, like, a super villain, sort of, but it's got a desperado theme, which I always thought was kind of cool. El Tigre was interesting. It was one of those, I think, one of those special Nicktoons. I can't remember if it was on the proper channel, because there were a bunch of cartoons that got onto, like, the cable-only Nicktoons thing for a while, and then they didn't really get into proper Nicktoons. But I think El Tigre might have been on proper Nicktoons for a while. But it was interesting. There was a lot of browns, a lot of like it had a sort of dusty, sort of rustic feel, which they were going for intentionally. But like I don't know, I feel like well, I can appreciate it as a style. It may have kind of made the show feel a little bit just kind of like uglier and a little bit less visually appealing. Like although it fit the whole thing, it's kind of like when you do that, like vibrant colors are really just attractive and people like to watch them. So I wonder if maybe it was like a bad stylistic choice or I don't know. People disagree. There are a lot of people I think who actually did like El Tigre, and yes. Anyway, though, point is, yeah, they had like a villain code and all kinds of stuff and things like that, and they would just go over the top because they had people with like, I don't know, like bombs for arms or things like that, and the show just didn't care. Same thing went for Mucha Lucha, where Mucha Lucha just had like, oh yeah, it's the book, the rules, all this stuff, and they had this character, and this I think was probably the best show. Like a lot of people remember Mucha Lucha, but this one had a good setup because they had Ricochet, who's like a student, and he's not really that good of a student, so he has to ask a lot of questions about like, what is this, what is that, he forgets things for the exams, but he's got a good heart, he's a good kid. And then he's got his friend, Bueno Girl, and Bueno Girl knows all the rules. So whenever something comes up, they're like, Bueno Girl, tell us about the rules. And she's like, yeah, here, for you, the audience, Ricochet, I'll explain the rules of the setting. And they would kind of go through, and because everything was about like superheroes and explosions and stuff like that, just crazy stuff. There were rules and there was consistency, but whenever they broke the rules or they went over the top or they did this or that, sometimes they would remember and they would just make a joke about it, and they'd just be like, oh yeah, by the way, like this is fine because we're silly and we're fun and it's just a good time. So don't worry about it, don't think about it. And yeah, all those shows were really great and they were really fun. And I kind of feel like it's interesting the way that like Hasbro has been doing the My Little Pony thing and the Transformers thing and stuff like that for a long time. And if you look at kind of their setup, what I feel like they want is maybe like a very over-the-top kind of show where the characters would just be sort of lovable, but you could just kill them all off and replace them with other characters and just be crazy and not worry about it. Like if you look at the old Transformers thing, like Hasbro has a long history of like just taking a great big dump on their popular shows. Like the Transformers had this thing where at one point they killed off most of the main characters in Transformers because they wanted to sell new toys. So the toy division came along and they said, hey, can you just like ruin the show for us? And the show creators were like, I guess, if we have to. And you get the same thing with like My Little Pony where they're just like, hey, like, do you think you could just sort of like ruin the characters? And like the show staff is kind of like, well, I guess, like if you really want us to. And so they just have to do it. But it's weird because, like, Hasbro consistently, they establish these settings, and it feels like the settings have rules, like, even G.I. Joe's, which is just, like, about lasers and explosions. Like, you still have, like, Cobra Command is this organization, and G.I. Joe is, like, this organization, and it doesn't feel like the whole thing is sort of this funny, like, loosely interpreted world, like Mucha Lucha would be. Like I say, Mucha Lucha had their rule book, but, they were kind of like... we got good guys and bad guys, and sometimes you can work with the bad guys, and sometimes you can work with the good guys, but the whole thing's kind of a game. You can kind of break the rules sometimes, and as long as you don't get caught, there's this, and that. And it's all very fluid. They can kind of change it, and it requires a lot less work on the writer's part. But when you do something with, like, say, My Little Pony, and you're changing directors, and you're doing all this stuff, like, they established this continuity back in, like, season 1, and then, 5 seasons later, which is admittedly quite a long time to run. Something changes, and the setting's not over the top like that. It's not tongue-in-cheek. It's not, it's not quite silly. It kind of feels like they were structured at the start, because they were, and then later on they get to this thing and they just have to make a change, and it's not like they're just, tongue-in-cheek, and they're just like, oh, hey, like, let's just be fun. It's kind of like, well, this character is just ruined now. It's weird. So, I feel like if you're gonna make one of those shows, one of the things that you would have to do is you have to say at the outset, like, yeah, this whole setting that I'm creating, it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be big, it's gonna be like, it's gonna have all these elements from like the most exciting and fun parts of like, this culture or whatever. Like Salvador Del Toro, he does like lots of fun Mexican culture things, which I really enjoy. But you start off with that kind of idea of like, we're gonna be silly, like Freakazoid, same deal. Like Freakazoid was a great show. Used to love that as a kid. Went on for I believe 2 seasons, and then they canceled and they went out with "We'll Meet Again," which was really heartbreaking. Man, I remember them singing like the "We'll Meet Again," don't know where, don't know when, and I really wanted them. Like, I remember getting to the end of that again as an adult and kind of getting the reference and everything like that, and just being like, ah, man. Like, I really wish they'd gotten another season, so this whole, like, "We'll Meet Again" thing would have looked over dramatic and just silly like it kind of was. But it really became the last thing they ever did, was they sang "We'll Meet Again," and we never saw Freakazoid again. I mean, we still could. Copyright lasts a billion trillion years, but yeah, probably not. So, but Freakazoid, though, same thing. Like, that started off, and it was just about this, like, loony kind of character. And I think that maybe initially, like, it feels like they were going to go for a little bit more structure and a little bit more continuity, because it was silly, and they were kind of tongue-in-cheek with the whole thing. But they started off and, like, they had Dexter Douglas, and he had this family, and there was sort of the alter ego thing, and it looked like they could have taken it in a more serious direction. But I think that all very quickly must have gone out the window, because, like, you get into things like, for example, Freakazoid has this deal with one of the villains, where he just starts to, like, freestyle, make up the song. It's like, everybody get down low, you know, caveman's underwear is brown, and he's just doing this, like, weird thing. And I remember as a kid thinking it was just really weird and not getting it. But it turns out that the reason why they included that in the show was the voice actor was just screwing around in the booth, and they got it all recorded, and then, like, the animators thought it was funny, and the staff thought it was funny, so they just put it in the show, and it became, like, a part of the show. And so stuff like that, that kind of mentality, I think, in Freakazoid, must have quickly just devolved into, like, yeah, Dexter Douglas is not really that interesting of a character, so let's effectively write him out of the show, and just have it be entirely about Freakazoid, because that's more fun. And, you know, this character does this and this character does that. So they were already so loose and already so silly that it was easy for them to just phase out all the more serious elements and then just have fun and kind of go crazy with it. So, you know, so that show very quickly, it started off a little bit more seriously, but then quickly fell into just complete silliness. But of course, the thing with that, though, is that Freakazoid was a little bit of a parody on the whole superhero thing. And, I think it must have been a fairly ripe time for that, because The Tick was also doing well in that time, and The Tick was same deal, superhero parody type of thing. But yeah, he was kind of more of a parody of superheroes, because I mean, like, he just hung out with his friend Cosgrove, who was, you know, like the commissioner in Batman. Like, I think at that time too, WB had Batman was running, and then they had like Superman and a lot of cartoons. There were a lot of like superhero cartoons that were doing really well, and so Freakazoid was like, yeah, we'll do a superhero cartoon too, and it was just kind of this like. You know, it doesn't matter. Like, villain of the week, thing of the week. Like, we just go to Japan today. Like, I don't care. Like, now we're out on the road. We're doing a road trip. And Dexter's getting beat up by his brother or whatever. His parents were just weird. Yeah, Animaniacs was another one from that same era that also did really well. But Animaniacs was more like skits. It was a very WB kind of thing. Like, the WB really liked that kind of we can be anywhere, we can do anything. You know, we don't really have a lot of rules sort of thing going on. I mean, if you think about how they started off with, like, Looney Tunes was, like, oftentimes based off of plays from, like old Italian plays, which is really funny. I remember reading this play called Volpone and the Fox was one. And they have this whole bit in Volpone and the Fox, and it sounded like something straight out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon to me, until I realized that Bugs Bunny actually borrowed ideas from plays like this. Like, there's this scene in Volpone and the Fox where, like, this guy has to dresses up as a tortoise, and, like, then he just, like, lays still and pretends to be a tortoise, like, while the police come and, like, look for him in his house. It's very weird, very silly, but it's a very Looney Tunes type of thing. And so Looney Tunes cartoons, a lot of times they sort of did that same thing, where they had, sometimes they had like a formula, like the Roadrunner or Wile E. Coyote, and, you know, but for the most part, it was just like whenever they wanted to do a new thing, like, you know, new episode, new thing, and they just kind of did that, and there wasn't really an arc or a story or like really much character development. You just did a new thing in a new setting, or, you know, a new set of circumstances. And like Tom and Jerry ran for, I can't remember, I think like 100 episodes or something like this. I looked it up at some point. And just put that sort of setup of just like, yeah, today we want to do a musical thing with Tom and Jerry. Or, you know, today we want to do this, today we want to do that. You know, they never had any rules. They just, you know, whatever they wanted to do, physics didn't matter, nothing mattered. It's all a big cartoon. And that was all fun, and that kind of worked. Yeah, WB started off that way. And then I'm not sure when exactly it got to be more that cartoons started developing more continuity. I mean, like, the trouble is that many of those cartoons, they came before my era. And you did sort of get into that a little bit, where people were, like, more consistent but still sort of formulaic. Like, you got into, I don't know, maybe like Scooby-Doo or like Yogi Bear or whatever, which was still kind of a similar formula, but the idea was that, like, Yogi Bear is always in Yellowstone. Sometimes he wasn't, but generally that was kind of what they stuck to. Or, like, you know, the Mystery Machine is, like, you just have all these staple things, and the idea is that the characters are going from place to place to place. And with those cartoons, they never really did, like, have a sort of continuity. It wasn't like stuff they did in the past episode really affected things they did in the later episodes. But I know, like, with Scooby-Doo, they did actually get into that sort of thing with, for example, the 13 Ghosts deal, which I believe didn't actually conclude. I might be wrong, but I remember watching that as a kid and them not really actually getting all the 13 ghosts captured. Might be incorrect, but I'm pretty sure that they just never really completed that whole thing. Yeah, but I don't know when they started to really transition into that. But I definitely remember. No, actually, I have no idea. I was gonna say, maybe I like cartoons. You got that a little bit with, like, I guess the Powerpuff Girls was a thing. Kids Next Door got into kind of more of a continuity. But I feel like it's a slightly more recent kind of development, because there's a bit of a hurdle involved when you look at the way that TV was set up, and I always used to hate this as a kid. But like, if a show has a continuity. Oh, Thundercats did this. There were definitely old cartoons that did this. But yeah, it was a thing that I used to hate as a kid, where if I would watch a show and it had a continuity and it wasn't just kind of like, you know, over the top and breaking the rules, and, you know, you never had to know anything. If you missed an episode, you might not know how they got from point A to point B. Or if an episode was badly made, you might think you missed an episode because they would go somewhere or do something and you'd be like, wait. Like, how did we get here and how did we do this? I remember that being an issue with, like, Thundercats, because I used to watch Thundercats when it was on Cartoon Network. There were a couple of other shows that were like that, now that I think about it. But, Dark Waters was something like that. Yeah, there were quite a few now that I'm really thinking about it. Dark Waters. I think Mighty Max had its own cartoon. Tony J voiced the bird that walked around with him. Tony J, his mighty deep voice. Yeah, there were a lot of shows, but it goes to show, like, exactly how I don't recall them right away. Yeah, the problem with those is that you have this very strict continuity where you're definitely going to be in a new place, and it's important how you got there. If you miss those shows, because you didn't have the internet at the time, you couldn't follow how they got from point A to point B. And they would do these reruns, and you just kind of had to hope that at some point the network chose to rerun one of the episodes that you missed. And what was unfortunate was that sometimes they wouldn't rerun that episode because maybe something came up. Like, maybe someone drew somebody's underwear at some point. Like, one of the animators got a little funny, and they decided to draw someone's panties in a shot, and some parent noticed it, and they called the network, and now the network has decided that episode's banned. And so then you never see it. Like, you don't know how you got from point A to point B. Surprisingly, I guess you get this a little bit with Pokemon, but Pokemon kind of everything is compartmentalized. So you get this sort of a challenge that you see, though, with things like that. Like Dark Waters, I remember used to do that. Thundercats, whatever. As a kid, I loved those shows, but I also kind of hated them. Because I don't know what happened to them, or they would just end. Like, this was the worst part, right? When you were a kid and you didn't have the internet to watch TV, those shows would just end, and you would think that maybe you missed the finale, or you missed the final episode. You didn't realize they were canceled. Like, the show, you know, like, the network didn't be like, at the end, they'd be like, this show was canceled, this is the end. Like, you would just keep watching, and they'd be like, Dark Waters, coming on, 4 p.m. or whatever, and you'd tune in, and it would be a rerun, and you'd think, man, shoot. Well, I really hope that they show the next episode, next week. And I remember doing this as a kid, tuning in every single week to watch, like, the show with a continuity, and never getting to see where they were going next, because the show was canceled, and I didn't know that. So it was really kind of a funny thing, and you'd get up to date and you'd see all the stuff that you missed and just not know that there was, or maybe the next season was coming out or whatever. But with the internet now, I guess we're starting to see a lot more continuity with stuff like Steven Universe and this and that, because with the internet now, if you miss an episode, you can go online and you can catch up. So you can know what was between this gap that you missed. But there's still, because we're still on cable, there's still kind of this desire now, I think. You don't see very many things that rely on this continuity. It's there, but it's not as common. And when it is there, it's much more frequently seen with adult things, because adults know where they can go to like actually see these things. They don't just come home and watch cartoons. But there's still kind of an effort, I think, to make cartoons that are consistent. You know, like if they do something in the past, they try to sort of remember it and bring it forward, but not so consistent that you have to watch all the previous episodes to know what's going on. Like every single new event is kind of self-explained, and you don't get like to be continued, and then you tune in and like Dave Stalwart is fighting Steve the Evil, and you're just like, oh, I don't know how we got here. Like I missed the episode before. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. We've gotten a little bit away from the topic. This is sort of a rambly personal time. It was, like I say, it was a thing I debated a lot about, different things I wanted to do. Consider doing one about moving. Consider doing one about the Doug. Consider doing one about Claudia. Yeah, I've been moving. Moving sucks. I don't know if I'll talk about it. I don't know if I have enough to say about moving to really make an interesting personal time. But then I'm concerned maybe I didn't really have enough to say about over-the-top cartoons. I just started rambling about cartoons in general. But yes, I hope this was still an enjoyable amount of rambling and that you guys had a good time. In other news, we're working right now on the Nepotism Adventure series. Copy is doing animation work on the musical section of NAS. We've got like a minute-long song in this one. It's a song about pony taxes. It's lots of fun. And I'll be out of town for a couple of days, so that'll slow us down a bit. But then once I get back, we'll get back on it, and I'll have some fun stuff to show. It's difficult to say. Like I used to post screenshots as I was going along of previous Mass episodes, but it was a little bit easier to do because the characters were essentially just standing around, not doing anything. So I could say like, here we are, here we're standing in a new place, we're standing in another place, and it didn't really like give all that much away. But when I'm trying to do a little bit more with visuals, like for example, I was working on that intro, and I didn't want to really give away scenes where it's like, oh, here's the house exploding, because then, when you guys actually saw the intro, you would have already pretty much seen the intro. You would know all the little things that are coming up. Here's Rarity getting crushed with a sack full of money, whatever, this or that. So I'm not exactly sure how I want to demonstrate progress on that. Like I do want to, but I want to be careful not to give away visuals. And the trouble is that like interesting visuals are things that I want you to see when the thing goes along. So I guess I could just post boring screen caps of like the characters standing across from each other, and that would show like, yeah, I mean, we're in a new location now. It'd be kind of similar. I don't know. I'll post updates on it as I go along. I'll figure out something. But yes. The internet, I think, over-the-top cartoons, we used to see a lot of those, and I think that they are still a lot of fun. Over-the-top kinds of entertainment, lots of fun. Always enjoyed that sort of stuff. It excuses a lot of things. If you want to make platinum robots and your universe is just dumb and has no rules, then by all means, make your platinum robots. You don't have to explain anything. It's a good way to go. But, I don't know. I just think it's weird when I see cartoons or works of fiction that want to be taken seriously, but then just don't bother doing research, or they don't work really hard to be consistent with themselves. I don't know. It's strange. Don't know why they do it, but I don't know. This is not important. Just rambly personal time. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.